The firelight flickers in the salt-aired shadows of Eumaeus's hut, casting the silhouette of a king against the rough timber walls. Odysseus, stripped of his beggar's rags for a moment of truth, stands before his son not as a father, but as a commander, conducting a lethal audit of the enemy. The air is thick with wood smoke and the tang of bronze. Telemachus watches, seeing for the first time the terrifying clarity in his father's eyes, a gaze that has measured the walls of Troy and the depth of the wine-dark sea. For 20 years, the name Odysseus had been a fading echo in Ithaca, a legend whispered by old men. While he endured the grinding gears of fate and the terrors of the deep, his home became a carcass and the suitors became the vultures. 108 noblemen, the high-born rot of the islands, moved into his palace like a slow-acting poison. They devoured his cattle and insulted his honor, believing the sea had claimed his bones and the salt had scoured his memory from the earth. The reunion in the hut was stripped of sentiment, replaced by the grim mechanics of a military briefing. Odysseus sat Telemachus down and demanded the tally, the forensic breakdown of the force they faced. This was a general assessing his infantry and the overwhelming odds. Telemachus spoke the numbers with a trembling voice. 52 from Dulichium, 24 from Same, 20 from Zacynthus, and 12 from Ithaca. 108 blades against 2. Odysseus listened with a stillness more frightening than fury, weaving the geometry of the coming slaughter. He did not seek a fair fight. He sought a systematic erasure. Odysseus commanded Telemachus to return to the palace and hide among the enemy, enduring their insults without drawing a sword until the signal. The plan was a masterpiece of restraint. The suitors would be lured into a sense of security while their weapons were spirited away under the guise of smoke damage. The Great Hall would be transformed into a locked box of bone and iron, a trap where the only exit was through the king himself. Odysseus instructed his son in the art of the lethal mask. They would not strike with a shout. They would strike from within the belly of the beast, as silent as the wooden horse that broke Troy. He told Telemachus that he must be as cold as the bronze they would soon wield. Even if he saw his father dragged by the heels or pelted with filth, he must wait for the trap to snap shut. The prince had to learn the hardest lesson. That silence is the ultimate vanguard of victory. Odysseus felt the weight of his years, the old scars on his thigh aching, a reminder of the white-tusked boar that nearly took his life in his youth. That scar was his secret sigil, the only proof of kingship remaining on his salt-worn body. He looked at Telemachus and saw the raw fire of the house of Laertes. Odysseus gripped a heavy staff, a surrogate for the bow, waiting in the palace treasury, and felt the familiar hum of the killer's focus, returning to his blood. The hunt was finally beginning. The threshold was crossed when the first light of a cold morning touched the cliffs. The plan was set, and the goddess Athena draped a veil of decrepitude over the king, hiding his muscles beneath the sagging skin of a beggar. As Odysseus began the long walk toward his palace, dressed in stinking rags and leaning on his staff, he saw the suitors in the distance. Their laughter echoed like the braying of mules. He committed to a forensic execution, moving toward the den of the predators who occupied his home. He walked past the gates where his old dog, Argos, lay on a dung heap. The animal recognized the master the world had forgotten, dying in that moment of recognition, a final witness to the king's return. Odysseus did not weep. He steeled his heart and entered the hall of his enemies. The air was heavy with roasted meat and the clatter of silver, a decadent backdrop to the coming butchery. He moved through the crowd, a ghost in his own life, marking the position of every door and pillar. The first contact was not a clash of steel, but a collision of spirits. Antinous, the lead suitor, saw only a wretched old man and struck him with a footstool, mocking the laws of the gods. The blow landed with a dull thud against the king's back, but Odysseus did not flinch. He stood like a rock in a surging tide, absorbing the pain and fueling his inner fire with the cold coal of his hatred. Telemachus stood nearby, his knuckles white, watching his father being treated like a dog in his own house. The struggle was internal, a war of patience against the urge for immediate retribution. Every insult was a marker. Every blow was a debt, recorded in the king's mental ledger. The original plan, to wait for the contest of the bow, felt like a slow-motion descent into a furnace. Odysseus felt the doubt of his son, the fear that the enemy was too numerous. He moved through the hall, begging for scraps from the men who seek to steal his soul, mapping the geography of his inevitable and calculated revenge. Odysseus realized the suitors were a singular, bloated organism of entitlement that had forgotten how to bleed. He adapted his strategy, deciding to let them provide the instrument of their own death. He watched Penelope, his queen, announce the contest. Whoever can string the great bow of Odysseus and shoot an arrow through the rings of 12 axes shall have her hand. The revelation struck him like a thunderclap. The bow was not just a weapon, it was the final forensic filter to reclaim his throne and his life. In that moment, the meaning of the struggle shifted. This was not about a title. It was a test of whether the man who left Ithaca was the same man who returned. Odysseus realized his greatest vulnerability was not the number of his enemies, but the possibility that his own rage might cloud his aim. He saw the bow as the ultimate arbiter of fate. The immediate conflict resolved as the suitors agreed to the contest, unaware they had just signed their own death warrants with their eagerness for the prize. The aftermath of the planning was a heavy silence that hung over the palace like a storm. To the suitors, it was just another night of revelry, but to the king, the air felt charged with the static of violence. He sat in a corner, watching the torches burn low and the wine spill across the tables. The cost was already visible in the eyes of Telemachus, who had moved from innocence to the grim focus of a man who knows he will soon be wading through the blood of his peers. The wounds Odysseus carried were nothing compared to the exhaustion of 20 years of hiding his heart. He had lost his youth and his friends to the sea. The lesson that carried him through was his lethal patience, the ability to be nobody until the exact moment he must be everything. He accepted the fate of the beggar to earn the rights of the king. The string was finally ready, and the arrow was hungry for the mark. The sacker of cities had one more ruin to build. History remembers Odysseus for his cunning and the wooden horse of Troy. But in the trial of the forensic reveal, he learned that a kingdom is not reclaimed by the strength of the arm, but by the cold geometry of the soul. The slaughter in the great hall draws near, a storm of cedar and bronze. Walk with us through the old stories. Subscribe to Saga Weaver, where ancient warriors face impossible choices.